In this episode of Write, Publish, Repeat, we find focus for the show. We have a plan.
Write, publish, repeat. It echoes through the air. A chorus for creators. A call to those who dare. With cookies as his compass and a pen that won't retreat, he journeys through the pages. Write, publish, repeat.
Hello and welcome to Write, Publish, Repeat. It is I, David Wright, and my co-host, Sean Platt. And today we're going to be talking... Well, I guess I should we wait and tell them what the episode's about after you say what your something cool is?
Yeah. So normally I like to surprise Dave with my something cools. And so, but today he got a sneak preview of my something cool because it was a compliment to him. It was my something cool. And so
it's so rare that I get those.
So I was going to share it all with you guys as the something cool.
Please, may I have another?
Oh my God, I made that joke to Bonnie just a couple days ago in a different context. But I used the same terrible accent. And pretty much the same exact phrase. So yes, today's episode content is directly related to my something cool. So Dave, do you want to start with your something cool?
Yeah, I guess. My something cool is the show on Netflix. I've only seen one episode so far, but the first episode really impressed me, and that was American Primeval.
Oh.
The Western. Have you watched it? No,
I haven't, but I'm definitely interested. That just dropped, right?
I think so, like maybe Friday, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a gritty Western with like different converging storylines. And it's a little different from other Westerns I've seen. I'm enjoying it a lot. Yeah.
Did you see, what was it called? Is it Horizon? Costner's epic fail, I guess?
No, I have not seen that.
So, do you watch Yellowstone?
No, everybody's told me to, but it's like a whole show, and then you got all the other shows. And
dude, you would love the character work in Yellowstone.
I'm sure I will. I'm not avoiding it for any specific reason.
So it is great. It's one so Neve tried to get me to watch it for about 2 years before I did. Mm-hmm. And it took me actually I wasn't in on the pilot. It took me maybe 3 or 4 episodes, but it was one of those. She compared it a lot to Succession, which it's a very different show, but like the family legacy stuff, like there are definitely some overlaps. And Succession is one of those shows that took me a couple of times. I watched the pilot. I did not like the pilot. And I'd watched it with Cindy, and I thought, oh, sometimes that affects the mood. Like if I can feel that she's really not digging something, like.
I enjoyed the pilot up until the very end, that whole baseball game. That was basically a giant kick the dog and kick the puppies as well. But I continued with it.
That's the point. Like they're such unlikable people, but I did not connect with the pilot. I could acknowledge that the writing was fantastic and that their acting was great, but I was done with it. But then I keep hearing about it, and people, I very much trust Neve if she tells me not this is good content, but this is great content that specifically you will like. And so I gave it, I'd seen the pilot once, I saw the pilot a second time on my own, and I decided no. And then I'm going to give this a try. By the third episode on my third time, I was in, and Succession is now one of my favorite shows of all time. Like I cried on the season 2 finale, not because I didn't know what was coming. I absolutely saw what was coming, but because by the time it was done, it was executed so beautifully that I literally wept at the craftsmanship. So Succession is great. I don't think Yellowstone is as great as Succession, but there are some similarities. And I don't know, like I do not know the behind the scenes shenanigans at all, but from like the outside looking in, it seemed like Taylor Sheridan and Kevin Costner had some major beef in between seasons 5 and 6 because Kevin Costner...
I'm peripherally aware of that.
and Costner wanted to go off and make the Horizon epic, and Taylor Sheridan's like, you're on the biggest show on TV. Are you kidding me? And Costner was willing to like bet the whole farm on Horizon. And you know me, I love a dude who's betting the whole farm. But then I watched Horizon and dude, I was bored to tears for the first hour of this movie. And I realized, we're watching a prologue still. Like we're still in a prologue. We're an hour into this Western and it's a prologue. I'm out.
It was a movie. It's not a show.
It's a movie. It's 2-3+ hour movies, I believe.
Oh my! Who does he think he is, Scorsese?
right. The first one came out last summer, and it bombed so hard that the second one was just canceled. Like it never got a theatrical release. Yeah, and same. Like if I had gone to the theater, I'd have been so painfully bored. You know, and it's just. I really appreciate this epic Western. Anyway, that's all to say that from what I understand, Netflix is like their American Primeval is basically like thematically a lot of what Costner was doing with Horizon, but like watchable, like really entertaining. So I haven't seen the 6th season of Yellowstone yet because it's like exclusive to cable or some bullshit right now. But I'm really looking forward to it. I do like that show.
Speaking of exclusive, I think it was AMC had a cartoon or anime. Does it count as anime if it's not Japanese made? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a style, not a region.
Okay. Well, anyway, they had this animated show called Pantheon, which got really good reviews. AMC, I guess, they started season 2, then said fuck it at some point, and I don't know how or what happened, but essentially they sold it and somebody else picked up season 2. Maybe Amazon, I'm not sure. But right now, you can watch the first season, on AMC Plus and maybe even Cinemax HBO because they have a deal with them now. But the only place you can see season 2 is like one country in Europe. It's like, what the fuck is that all about? Like, you can't even finish watching it.
Yeah, some of these rights things drive me nuts. Like, I was legit excited about Yellowstone. I was talking to my mom, and she was telling me about this great scene that's in season 6, and I said, "Don't tell me. I want to see it." And then I went to go see it, and I know that 2 of my favorite characters got their own spinoff because, of course, they did. Taylor Sheridan owns Paramount Plus, and so I was all excited, and I went to go put it on, and it wasn't available on anything, not Paramount or Peacock. It's only if you have cable. I don't have cable, so it's like. But dude, really, this is not my something cool yet, but. Even if you don't watch Yellowstone, which I do realize is 6 seasons, that's a lot to chew. But watch 1883. 1883 is one of my favorite limited series of all time, and I think it is my favorite Western of all time. It is.
I love being on both ends of this. Either when someone's pitching a show to you, and they say, but you gotta wait till like episode 9 until it gets good. And you're like, oh, fuck. Or you're trying to convince someone else. You gotta watch the show, but you gotta wait till episode 9.
1883 is good on episode 1. If you don't like episode 1, you won't like the show. Okay. But if you like episode 1, then you will be in tears by the end of the show. And it's independent. It's a prequel. It literally doesn't matter if you see nothing else in the Yellowstone universe. You can watch these. I'm going to say it's 10 episodes. It might only be 8. But it is stunning television. It is the writing, the acting, everything about it is phenomenal. It's basically if the Oregon Trail was kind of like, you know what? It could be called the Oregon Trail. It's about this group of people who are going from Texas to Oregon and everything that fucks them up along the way. So, and what's his name? Best mustache in the world?
Sam Elliott?
Yes, yes. Sam Elliott leads the trail.
I have a poster of his mustache, just his mustache,
dude. Yeah, his mustache should get all kinds of awards. But really, I cannot say enough nice things about it.
Wait, Sam Elliott, I think is in The Simpsons. Was Simpsons or Family Guy? I don't know. I think it's The Simpsons. And basically, at some point, his mustache comes off and is like running around like a dog or something.
Oh my god!
Unless that was hilarious. A fever dream.
It might have been. All right, so Yeah, my something cool is this show. And I love being able to say this because last week, my something cool was not this show.
Something shit.
It was my something shitty. And, you know, the thing about Dave is like, Dave never wants to not do the thing. Dave wants to do the thing, but then Dave goes into his basement and spends too much time there. So Dave emerged from his basement.
It's hard to manage all those people in my basement.
Well, do you have to like feed them on a regular schedule? Because you don't have a regular schedule for me. I weep at the people in your basement. Like,
well, I make time for the things that are important, and that's my hostages.
Okay. Well, I'm glad your hostages have routine. That's great.
Yes.
But Dave apparently abandoned his hostages for a few hours this weekend and popcorned a bunch of ideas. And we have a nice rhythm that we're going to approach for this show. And thinking about it, of course, this makes sense, thinking about it more seasonally. So we approached it as, hey, what would this look like if we were doing a proper season one? And do you remember how season one of Seinfeld was kind of shitty? And then they were lucky to get a season two, and then it got progressively better.
I actually watched it when it was called the Seinfeld Chronicles, so I wasn't too picky at the time.
Well, this is like that. Let's just pretend that everything up until today was like, or The Office. You know, The Office, the American Office came, and then in between seasons 1 and 2, the 40-Year-Old Virgin comes out. Steve Carell becomes big. NBC
and he got like hair plugs or something.
Did he?
Yeah, because season 2 on, his hair looked like thicker and more.
You know what? You are absolutely right. I'm picturing you're totally right. That did happen. Anyway.
And I never even realized it until like I went back and watched the old first season with my family because my son wanted to watch it. So.
How did he like it? It's one of Ethan's favorite shows.
Yeah, he loves it. He's watched it twice through, I think.
Yeah. My son too. Okay, so we thought about seasons and thought that it'd be cool for our first season to kind of chunk it up. The number 3 works great. Write, publish, repeat. 3 episodes on each one. So like focusing on the writing process, the publishing process, and the repeating process, and all the overlap that happens in there. And of course, those are very general guidelines, but it gave us some really nice shape to start planning the next couple of months of the show. And that's exciting. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to know like, okay, we're plotting this. You got to plot success, right? No one makes a TV show without a script. And I just felt like I don't
know if that's fully true.
I felt like we were meandering just a little bit. So I love that. And our first episode is just about productivity today, about how do you write? Sometimes writing is as simple as ass and seat and getting the shit done, right? So I'm going to go, before we actually start, Dave, I'm going to go all the way back to before we met. So not many of the writing stories I have go from before we met, because I was writing online for less than 2 weeks before you sent me an email, and we were friends like the next day. So we've had like, at this point, you are one of my oldest friends in the world, which is cool.
Wow. I'm so sorry for that.
Well, it doesn't come with its challenges, but
all great things do.
But you were instrumental in everything that happened to me because we came up together. We learned to do this online thing together. We wrote together very early. But if I rewind a year, like I hadn't written it all publicly until right when I met you. But even before that, I hadn't written anything. The only thing I wrote before I met you was I used to write movie reviews for me. Like, I didn't share them with anybody. I just like, how cleverly can I talk about this movie? And I only started doing that because, do you remember Neil Cumston?
Patton Oswalt on
Movie well, no one knows this for sure, but on Ain't It Cool News, which we both used to read way back in the day before we knew that Harry Knowles was like a monster or whatever. I
didn't even know that.
Oh yeah, he has all kinds of women have said all kinds of things about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but this is long before that. The first time I even thought about moving to Austin was because they used to have the Butt-Numathons here, where Ain't It Cool News would put on these 24-hour, movie marathons. And Ain't It Cool News? What was it about Ain't It Cool News?
The reviews. What led
so there was this fake reviewer who legend says was Patton Oswalt, and he called himself Neil Cumston, and his reviews were so funny. They used to just make me laugh. So I used to want to write those reviews for myself when there wasn't one from Neil. But other than that, I really hadn't written anything. And Cindy and I had the preschool, and then, you know, my daughter was off to preschool, off to kindergarten, and I used to hang out with her all the time, and all of a sudden she wasn't there, and I was a little sad, and Cindy was like, why don't you try using the rest time as writing time? And so that was the first time ever that I had a writing habit. And I would go into, again, this is a year before Writer Dad. This is just, it's a 90-minute block. We're going to have lunch, and then the children are going to go down to sleep, and you're going to go in this room and you're just going to write. And Cindy said, I've got everything else. And so I had no idea what I was doing, like none. I'd never written anything before. I literally started chapter 1 and just made things up as I went along. Chapter 2, no outline, no structure, nothing. But 4 months later, I printed out 600 pages of a really terrible book that had Once Upon a Time and the end. Not literally, but yes, right? And so
that'd be a great story. Once Upon a Time, the end, and it took 4 months to write that.
I do like that. I feel like there's some writers that is the story and the time that it takes. But it was that alone taught me that I could produce, and that if I could just get better and better and better, then that would be enough, right? So the hardest lesson, I think, was that one, because if I had started out where I didn't have that time block in a multiverse, in a different version of this exact universe, I don't know that I ever would have become a professional writer, because without that habit and without producing something after that 4-month period, that was like a light bulb. It was like a room full of light bulbs. Oh my goodness, I can do this. If I could do it once, I could do it again, but better the next time. You know, now I'm going to go, now that I know that I can write, 400 pages or whatever it was, now that I know that I can write this quantity of work, now I need to learn how to do it. Right? Like learn about outlining, learn about structure. I went from reading Stephen King's On Writing and thinking I can do that, to realizing I could do the hard part of sitting down, which is what basically that's the number one takeaway I got from that book, is he grew up telling stories, and all he has to do is sit down and tell them. And I remember him saying like his daily words were like 2,000 words. And hilariously, I didn't have any frame of reference to know that was a lot, right? I knew he produced a lot, but it seemed like 2,000 words in my head. That's not that many words. Like I could write that many words. And so it was that very early, like getting it down. So for you, it's gas station time, I guess, is where you were like getting your ideas down consistently, but you didn't really produce consistently in any kind of measurable way until you became a journalist, right?
Yeah. Well, I've been writing since I was in, middle school, writing stories, lots of beginnings, no endings, or sometimes endings, but no beginnings. And yeah, writing has always been my escape, the thing I love to do the most. And well, that and drawing, they kind of alternate. But I gave up a lot. I would start something, get frustrated with it, or not know where it was going, and I'm like, okay, I'll move to the next thing. And I always plan to go back to the other thing, and I've gone back, and like some of our earliest stories are resurrections of things I was starting at the gas station when I was 18. That and
Available
Darkness. Yeah. So it wasn't until I was a journalist and I had deadlines that, I started to realize I could do it. I could put together, a beginning, a middle, and an end and plan out my time. And it wasn't until I met you that, like, I had someone that kind of buoyed me and gave me the confidence to know that I could do it.
For those at home, he said buoyed, not booed.
Well, it became booing later, so
it took many years to get to booing.
So yeah, it wasn't the consistency paid off only after I had to write for a living as a reporter and then, as an author.
So, serious question. Do you think that if paychecks, because there was a time where we had enough kind of coming in from books that we had already written and already sold. So the pressure of hitting those deadlines wasn't the same, right? So when we had copywriting work and we had deadlines, you had to hit those deadlines or the money wasn't coming in. And then when we transitioned and we're like, okay, we're no longer doing this, we're going to put everything we have into Yesterday's Gone, which was a big risk, but that paid off for us. And we knew that to make that payoff, we couldn't miss our deadlines. We were publishing live every week. And that was part of, I don't know, our gentleman's agreement that we had with our audience. We're going to publish every Tuesday and we're going to keep this train going. But then we had a couple of deals of the day, and we had that 47 North deal, and all of a sudden we had enough money coming in to kind of take the pressure off. Do you think ultimately that was a good thing for you or a bad thing for you? Because
No, it has nothing to do with me falling apart. It wasn't that at all. It was the complexity of all the things we were building. It was really easy in the beginning because we were making it up as we went along. And we had vague ideas for where something might end, but it wasn't anything I actually had to figure out. But as each season of each book progressed, and then we had an audience, like many, many people reading it, there was a pressure there to deliver, and I couldn't fuck it up. And the anxiety and overwhelm got to me. The two things together, I think, are what really just burnt me out on all of it. So.
Yeah, I remember the era of Yesterday's Gone season 3 and 4, because with season 3 you had to wrap up all of these things together, and at that point Yesterday's Gone was already a little less collaborative than it had been in season 1 or 2. You were like, out of my dungeon, I'm gonna figure this out, where you're putting 3 together, and then 4 had the added complexity of, I didn't even want there to be a 4th season, right? so you had to kind of reboot the ideas in another setting and another you had to carry the story forward, and you weren't quite ever comfortable carrying the story forward. You wanted to end it at 3. I wanted 6 seasons. So I feel like that didn't help, because anytime I used to be naive enough to think that anything against your will was a temporary thing and it wouldn't really matter, you'd warm up, and you can warm up, but when you're swimming upstream, it's very hard. You don't find the flow. We talk a lot about flow, right? And if you're not aligned with something, flow is a lot harder to achieve, which is a really great takeaway. And now when we do things, that's one of the things I look for first. Is this aligned with Dave's natural tendencies? Because if it's not, then I know it's going to be harder and not as fun for you. And that really matters. So that's what makes the Write, Publish, Repeat stuff and the business stuff harder, because by nature, it's not with your tendencies. Where it's very easy to pick creative projects that you'll light up around.
Well, I do think it's like climbing a mountain, or it's like shoving coal into a furnace of a ship so it doesn't sink. Let's say it just doesn't float, but it also needs to move forward or it'll sink. And I shovel all this coal, and I think I reach the island, and then we get there, and you're like, here's 20 more piles of coal. We're going another island. And I'm like, well, fuck, I just finished all this. I need a rest.
Well, that's because that's the repeat part of it, right? A working writer is always working. And even if the working is just percolating on what's coming next, right? But that's always been hard for you. You're like, dude, do not tell me what's next. I'm having a hard enough time with what's now, right? And because, and that's a difference in our strength finders. Do you remember, I think I asked you this a couple episodes ago, do you remember any of your strength finders results by chance?
No, not at all.
We should take that again. I mean, I take it every few years anyway, because I'm curious to see if things change. I'm pretty consistent. I think the last 3 times I've taken it, I don't know what they are after 3, but my first 3 are always idea, future, and communication. But
Yeah, I think ideas was up there. Probably communication, technical shit like planning and stuff. Probably at the
dude,
very bottom.
I guarantee you communication was not on your top list. It was not. I defy that.
Maybe not. Well, I don't know. I'm good at communicating some things.
Yeah, well, yes, but your natural tendency is not to communicate first. You actually retreat from communication. So you have the ability to communicate. You are a good communicator when you communicate.
I just don't like to bother people.
That's you can't be top communicator if you don't want to bother people. All right. So do you want to talk some nuts and bolts? Do you want to shit on other productivity advice at all? Because I will say that from the time I've known you, you've been like, okay, now I'm into bullet journals, or now I'm into this or that or whatever. And we were talking about this a little bit before the show, and I said, oh, this would be good to talk about here. Is you asked me if I had ever used the Notes app Bear for Mac, and it rang a bell. I Googled it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I used that for like 10 minutes, and then I started to explain that I used to I really love beautiful user interface. Like I love a gorgeous designed app. It provides a lot of joy, right? And so that's how I used to decide what tools I used. It was basically like what gives me the best feelings aesthetically when I use it. And now that's bullshit. Like now I'm always looking for what is the simplest thing that folds into everything else. So if Mac has a built-in reminders or built-in notes or whatever, even though it's not the best app out there, it's the best ecosystem, it's the fewest decisions to make, and it's a lot like how, you affectionately make fun of me like for having 8 shirts, right? It's because it's fewer decisions, and
what I liked about Bear is aesthetically it looks nice, and I got it in the dark. I think it always was dark mode, and I had issues with Apple Notes where it would just randomly sync the wrong damn thing or delete it. iCloud is such a pain in the ass to use. So I just started using this, and I've had no issues with this at all. And it's never lost anything. So I don't know. I just like it. But as for productivity, no, I don't usually shit on other systems because I just assume they're not for me. It's whatever works for you is the right system.
Well, what I mean by that is that you've been systems shopping since I met you, right? So it's like somebody who loves, who has a disorganized house, but really loves going to the Container Store or reading Real Simple, right?
I've done that.
Okay. Why am I not in any way surprised? Right? I get that because it's the fantasy of here's this perfect system. But that's why I feel like a lot of productivity advice can become its own distraction because it keeps us busy instead of productive, right? And I feel like a lot of these frameworks, the promises are sexy for sure, and I have fallen I've fallen for them many times over the years. But the last several years, I've just kind of distanced myself from all of that and realized that a lot of these frameworks are basically there because the real work is hard to do, right? And it feels really good to be shopping for a system instead of just sitting down and doing the work. And yes, there does need to be some amount of planning and some amount of intention, but a lot of times it's as simple as what are my next steps? So it's not about having the system. It's about having the willpower and fortitude to know, what are the concrete things that I'm going to do today. So I feel like when it comes to productivity, it's not about here's the system that works. It's more of a mindset you need to approach the day with. Do you know about the rocks and pebbles, or I don't even know what they call it, but do you know this metaphor, this analogy? The boulders?
No, it's not ringing a bell.
What are your boulders? Okay, so imagine you have this big giant glass vase, okay? And you have a whole bunch of rocks and sand and boulders, right?
I have one of those in my garage, a case full of rocks and boulders.
And if you put the water in first, then you can't get any of the other stuff in, right? there's really only one way to do it. You have to get the rocks in, the boulders in first, the biggest, and then the rocks, and then the sand, and then you can pour the water in, right? And so a lot of times we start with the sand because it's like, what can I just knock out of the way right now? Oh, I promised to text my mom. This is literally things I do. They're on my list. Oh, I'm going to text my mom. And then, right, like, that's done. Now we have a time I'm going to talk to her, and that leads to something else. And those are the things that I do when I'm feeling resistance because the actual work is hard. And if my boulders are easy for the day, I don't have resistance to them. I just do them. But if there's something that it is a little bit harder, usually because there's some sort of like thinking that I have to do. I actually really love thinking. I love complicated problems that I have to solve, but only when I'm actually solving them. I'm never like, oh yay, I get to go untangle this client knot, right? Like once I'm there, I'm in it. But ahead of time, I'll have resistance. So then I start doing the sand. But it's always a mistake, and the older I get, and the more things I have to juggle, the better I am about just being a grown-up and hitting the boulders first. So in your instance, we actually had this exact situation late last year where there was something you were trying to do for the fiction channel for YouTube videos, and it was complicated. Like it was a complicated thing. This is so you and so me. So I'd given you this complicated job that in my head, I knew it was complicated, but it can be done. If I can imagine it, it can be done. Dave can do this. So you're on this and you're like, big nose motherfucker has no idea how hard this shit is. What does he think? and you want to impress me. Like you want to like deliver it. And so you're doing your daily check-ins and you're like, I'm on day 93. This thing is really, really hard. And so I chime in and like, dude, so there was like 18 things on this list and you picked the hardest one and you're kind of stuck there. So why don't you just do all the other ones first and we'll come back to that, which is, and you're like, what you actually said is something like, great idea. And then you proceeded to beat your head against the thing instead of doing the other ones. So not to get too in the grain here, but I need to know how to do the thing that I don't know how to do. And I would love, like, if you could just, like, when you assign me something, you could just say, here's how you do it, and I don't have to figure out how to do it. Because when I have to figure it out, I'm not very good at figuring things out unless somebody shows me. I might be stupid in that way. I don't know. But I need to see it happen, and then I can learn. If I'm reading and other stuff, I have a hard time processing that. This is actually illuminating. So if I send you like video tutorials on something, or if I like record a quick video for you, is that super helpful?
Yeah, that will help me immensely. I have difficulty with new things until I figure them out. And this is true of almost anything in my life. Like I need like someone to hold my hand the first time through, and then I'm good. Then I'm good to go. And if I don't know how to do a step of a long thing, let's say I know how to do all 30 things before that, but that one thing I don't know, I'm going to obsess about that fucking thing I don't know because it's going to bother me that I don't know it, feeling like I should know it, and I'm just not going to get anything done.
Okay. So that is very illuminating. So
see, I'm great at communicating.
Okay. Well, I would hope that a good communicator would do this sooner than 15 years. But okay, so how do we break you out of that pattern? Because we've had this versions of this conversation before. Where's the version of Dave where when you get in there, you're like, I need help. Like, I don't understand how to do this thing. And I know you're afraid to, or not afraid to say that, but you don't want to say that because you want to be valuable. And if
if I can't do something that you assign me, like what's the point of having me around? That's my internal thought.
Right, but
I mean, obviously you're looking for something for me to do, but if I can't even do the thing that you're looking for me to do to fill and you're like, well, I'm out of things you can fucking do, Dave.
Well, yes, okay, there is truth to that, and it's fair. But also, like, I'm trying to get you to a place of self-sufficiency, right? So it's okay to ask the person who's offered help for help. Right? Because the alternative is you spend way, way, way longer on something, and then there's less bandwidth for other things. And if you're a working artist, then your time is like, you can't get more of that, right? So
Don't I know it?
right, like, right, you already have a family you don't want to spend time with, like, you don't.
That is not true, you bastard.
Dave's so red right now.
He didn't mean that.
For those of you listening, why don't you use headphones? Maybe then it'd be better.
Yeah, I don't have headphones at the moment. Go on.
All right. I'm sorry. He really does love you.
I hate you.
And Santa's real.
Wow.
Okay.
You're a monster.
So yes, you need time, right? Time is the most important thing for you to be able to have. And then if you're going to do the work, like that is your superpower and your kryptonite, actually, right? So you're like, I forget the characters in Animal Farm, but I think it's the horse who's like, I will work harder, right? That's you. You're always willing to work harder. But it's the working.
I'm a big old horse.
It's the working smarter. It's like, how do you produce more in less time and feel better about it? So what are the things that get you out of your seat? What are the things that give you resistance? You hit on one of them, which is great, which is when I don't know how to do something. So is that true regardless of what it is? If, like, let's say it's fiction. So one of the things that you said in the author velocity email that you just wrote was about sometimes when you're writing and you don't know what to do, you can leave like a note. You can come back to that, yes. Right? Mm-hmm. So are you able to do that in fiction? If, let's say, you don't know how to have this dialogue exchange between two characters in any given time, will you leave a note and come back to it, or will you try to muscle through that dialogue exchange?
Most of the time I'll leave a note. There are times though when it's a bigger thing or it's something that really like fucks with the rest of the story that I don't know, then I'll kind of obsess about it and get stuck in my head. But generally speaking, like it's usually like a scene that I'm not really into writing at the moment. Like maybe it's this big long battle scene. And I'm like, I'm tired. I just wrote 5 other battle scenes, whatever. Like I'll come back to it. Or if it's something where I need to make a phone call, how the best way to dispose of a body, I'll get back to it because I don't have my handy list next to me at all times.
So what's the number one thing that keeps you from producing? And what's the number one thing that keeps you going because you're a little binary in that way too, where like if you're in a funk, you tend to be in a funk, but once you come out of it, you'll have like progressive good days. You're not like good day, bad day, good day, bad day. You have like, you're a little more like parabolic, I guess. Like, yeah. Right? So I
believe it's called manic depressive.
Well, I was trying to be kind. It's seasonal, right? Like, so do you feel the changes when they're coming on so you can anticipate them more, or do they catch you by surprise? Like you think you're in a good spot and then all of a sudden you slap into a wall of resistance.
Yeah. And a lot of times like other things definitely interfere with my work mood, I guess you could say. Like if I'm a financial setback or just obligations that keep me from being able to do what I want when I want it. Because I do have like severe energy dips throughout the day. And like a lot of the times, like my key productive time is exactly the time that I have to be doing something else. And it bothers me that I can't just, do what I got to do. But then I would be, a shitty parent. And, I was already like that for several years anyway. I think I was more productive when I was willing to be a shitty parent.
Oh, that's true. And it showed up in every book you wrote too.
Yes.
Here's the sad dad who's just like wishes he had more time because it's fleeting.
Yeah, I'm writing a lot though.
Yeah, it's the tropiest Dave thing there is, other than pissing.
But And the pissing is because I've been sitting in the seat so long, I need to piss, but I'm not going to get up because I'm writing. But I think, now when I'm excited to tell a story, especially when a story is still new and I really want this story out there, I want to tell this story, that's probably when I have the most momentum, strictly speaking, writing. So once I'm well into a story, or maybe it's a second book in a story, the mystery is sort of dead, the romance is dead, and I'm faking my way through it until it hits again. So,
Okay, so if you could pick do you think that two-part question. Do you think that if you could design an ideal schedule and stick to that schedule consistently, how much of an effect do you think that would have on your productivity? And what would that schedule be?
I wrote just such a schedule last week. Ideally, I was thinking of it for Write, Publish, Repeat, and for Author Velocity. Like, how could I be most useful to our audience in that way? And I opened with, paying attention to what's going on in the publishing industry. So reading the industry, websites and blogs and shit like that. So I would begin my day doing that just to get when I'm immersed into something, the world of something that genuinely interests me, it's a lot easier to get in that mood to do stuff.
Oh, I know that about you. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to resurrect the podcast, was because we're going to be doing a lot in publishing, and I wanted you to have a more active role in it. And I knew that if I could stoke your natural curiosity, I mean, for those of you listening, Dave is actually the one who is largely responsible for us getting going in the indie space in the very, very early days. Before Johnny even suggested a podcast, Dave was reading John Locke and David Gaughran and sending me links and telling me to read books. And Dave, I was deep in the copywriting world feeding us. and Dave was actively dreaming about being able to write fiction. And I had, thanks to, Lori, who I was working with at the time, was very generous with the amount of latitude she gave Dave, who was kind of, because of, he was an appendage to me on her payroll, essentially. And you wrote Available Darkness during that time. And it was like, what can we do? And then Kindle started to mainstream, and you got very curious. And that curiosity led to a lot of great things for me personally and for this space. And so I do believe that you can absolutely be there, but at some point it went from, I'm really curious about this, to I'm really overwhelmed by all of this. And so it's about paring it down and getting curious again about the things that really matter, because there is a lot of overwhelm, and I feel like a lot of it doesn't really matter. And if you can figure out what you're great at and what we can be great at together, then that's what we focus on. So we don't need to learn everything in publishing. Okay, this is actually, I think...
Well, did you want to hear the rest of my schedule, or...?
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, well, first about Lori, I think, she was very generous in paying me, but I think there was a benefit to her in that she knew when she had a wild fucking hair up her ass idea in the middle of the night, Dave was around and he could make it happen by morning.
That's true.
So, okay. But so after that, there's breaks in the day where I got to fucking take people to work and school and all that shit. So then I would have a nice 2 to 3 hour block of writing, and then another hour block at some point, depending when, where I would just do admin or website work or video editing, just stuff that I don't have to think too much. I'm just doing something.
More like pulling levers.
Yes. And then, whatever we're doing, podcast or, Zoom call, whatever we got going on, another hour to 2 for that. And then either I would write more at night or draw, because I want to draw more and I want to, do that because it's missing from my life, that because I have not to go off, but I just have all these, ideas for my comic strip that I did forever. And I've been just rough sketching, writing down the jokes and the ideas. And it's painful because it kind of dies when I don't do anything with it, and that sucks. And I was going to do it for my mom for Christmas, and didn't do it because I was busy doing other shit. So I'm
how
trying to
long
make more time for that.
how long would you like to spend each day drawing?
Like an hour or two, but it's hard to find the time, and I feel like, especially now with the driving and stuff, it's just like my day is so segmented, and parts of it belong to everybody but me. So
Yeah, it feels like I mean, I know that we're already leaning into this, figuring out the dictation, but it seems like dictation would be a great thing for you because you have that car time.
yeah. So anyway, what were you going to say? That's my schedule. Ideal schedule.
I forgot. I know that I had something, but I don't remember what it was, so it doesn't matter.
Are we helping other people with this dissection of me, by the way?
Well, I mean, I think you are more of the avatar. I mean, for me, my schedule is really clear. So I am super, super distracted naturally. And I don't want to follow routine naturally. Like I never have. It's what makes me an idea person. It's what makes me bouncy. It's what, like, I want to go on to the new thing. I'm generally like you. The romance dies. I really, really love the first lap of anything, right? But then I kind of want to hand the baton off, which is why I love collaborating, because I'm like, oh, let me do the thing that's really exciting, and then we build the teams, right? So that first lap is always going to be the most exciting to me, and I'm always going to be distracted, and I'm always going to want to go jump to something else instead of the thing I have to do. So because I don't like routine, because I'm not wired for routine, what do? I give myself very loose routines, and then as much latitude within that as I possibly can. So for example, we both know, I don't think either one of us has ever written to an outline exactly like the outline. The endings change, like nuance within the chapters changes. But we also know at this point that writing without an outline takes longer for an inferior result. For us, your mileage may vary, right? Like there are some people who are very, very natural pantsers. But we have found that we do better work in less time and with more joy if there's some sort of an outline. But it's nice to have outlines that allow you to really color within that space. So that's how I treat my schedule. I'm very, very rigid where I can be and where I need to be. So that's like my day comes in 3 chunks always. Morning time is maker time. I'm up very early. Really ideally, so here's something that is not quite perfect, but there's a difference between perfect and perfect for the situation, right? So in a perfect world, so in like your perfect world, you don't have to drive anyone anywhere, right? You just have this time, right? So in my perfect world, I just wake up and I immediately do the writing thing that I'm going to do. I just get straight into creative because that is when I am most fertile. Like I wake up, I'm ready. I'm ready to make things. I'm ready to think. And like, it doesn't take me time to wake up. Like I haven't used an alarm in years. The only time I ever set an alarm is if I travel, and I always wake up before it anyway. I just am nowhere near confident enough to not set an alarm. But I wake up before any alarm and I'm ready to go. However, it's not really practical for me to get straight into the writing or whatever I need to do because I don't want to be in or out of email all day. And I don't want to be in and out of Slack all day because those are my Achilles heels, both of those. I love to check email and Slack instead of doing my work. It's awesome. Like anytime I feel resistance, I'm like,
I don't like either.
well, both are great because I'm a communicator. And if somebody has a question, I'm like, I can answer that. Or I'll think of something to say to somebody instead of doing my work. And so I really shouldn't be in and out of Slack and email during my most productive time, nor do I want to end the day with it because it just feels like a bummer. Like I'm, like I do get up around 4 and I finish my meetings around 4. And so if all of a sudden I have just like this, like, a cascade of emails that are just sitting there, like I just don't enjoy my evening as much. I don't enjoy dinner as much. So I really like to have a tidy desk as much as possible. And that means doing it first thing in the morning. The good thing about doing it first thing in the morning is that I'm pretty efficient because I want to get to my creative. Like I want to start that stuff. So I'm like, communicate, then get to the thing. So I have this like 0 time that's like before phase 1 that's just kind of like start the day, set my intentions, go through my reminders, like know what I'm going to do. And then it's maker time, and it's maker time until 7:00. I'm usually working on my draft, and then Cindy and I go for a walk, and then I make stuff all the way until lunchtime with another break to walk or stretch or do something active away from the desk for just like 10 minutes. And then I have lunch, same day, every day, unless there's something like next week I'm going downtown, I have to have lunch with someone, or I get to have lunch with someone. So that interrupts it. But I'm pretty religious. At 11:00, I have lunch, then we nap, and then I'm up.
Bubble bath?
Ideally, no, I've changed my bubble baths. They used to come midday. My bubble baths now are before bedtime, but I always do get a couple hour nap in there, and then it's meetings, Zooms, podcasts, all of this stuff, more Slacks, more emails, and just very loosely, that's maker time, me time, and manager time. Now within that, I will break the rules. So there might be certain things that I have promised to do during maker time or during manager time, and they're on my list, and I'll get in there and I'm like, I don't really want to do that. And I'll like do the thing you could do in reminders, just slide it over to tomorrow, but I'm still doing something that I'm supposed to do in that time, on that time. I won't not make something and get on a call with somebody, like, and during meeting time, I never, ever try to go make stuff because my willpower is pretty diminished by the afternoon. I'm creatively tired. I know that I would get diminished results for the amount of output that I'm giving it. And so instead, if I have, like, on a day where I mercifully have fewer meetings or something, and I have afternoon time, I'll do more managerial work. Like I'll communicate more, I'll make more lists, I'll write scripts that are a little more mechanical than, like YouTube scripts rather than really creative novelty and stuff that I would do early on. It's just more manager type stuff. So have you ever been able to like chunk your day consistently in even like a Broadway for like 30 days? What's the longest you've been able to maintain consistent flow or schedule of some sort?
I don't know. I think the thing that really throws a wrench in it for me, because I said I don't like answering email or Slack, and it's not that I actually enjoy like reading from people and answering. What I don't like is when somebody has something that I don't know the answer to or requires me to do something else. If you're adding a step to my day, I'm going to be just agitated by it, not at the person, but just agitated. Okay, now that's a thing I have to fucking remember to do or write down and remember that I wrote it down. So like anything that throws a wrench in my day.
But would you ever set that aside and say like, okay, so
if I set it aside, I'm going to fucking forget, like I did with the person that emailed you and said, Dave fucking forgot me, god damn it.
Okay, all right, so that makes sense. Okay, so what is the number one thing that you can do? Maybe like a challenge. Do streaks work for you?
I don't know.
So that's another way that like I'm either on or off. So like I had a 10,000 steps a day streak for over 3 years because it was 1,000 plus days. And then we had a freeze in Texas and I couldn't walk because the sidewalks were all just like frozen over. And I broke my streak, and then I went like 6 months without like really walking 10 steps.
Yeah, I don't think streaks work for me because it's pressure. It's pressure to do something or to not break something. I think for me, what works best is just having the right mindset and like living in the role that I see myself in, and just like doing the stuff, like not overly worrying about, this or that, or having to do this or having to do that. I feel like just managing expectations is difficult. When I have more control or authority over, what I'm doing, and it's not beholden to anybody else or relying on somebody else to do something before I can do another thing, I flow a lot better. But anytime anybody else is involved in what I'm doing, it just stops it long enough that it's an annoyance to my brain.
Okay, that checks out. All right. So if we're talking about like if there's a one big takeaway that we want to leave the episode with, it's the idea that productivity can be overly complex and it doesn't need to be. That sometimes it's as simple as making a decision and then seeing that decision through, right? Deciding what you're going to focus on and then focusing on that thing. So it's let's say 1 month from today, what do we want to have accomplished? Let's move a boulder for you. Let's build a habit. What is the one thing that you want to be most consistent about? Is there something that you want to accomplish every day? Like you're basically trying to build a habit and we can focus on doing that? Or is it like, I would like to get this project done? Or I would like, even if it's not directly work related, but it's something that will, allow for more space. So you've mentioned drawing, not just in this conversation, but many times in the past. Like it's recurring. So when something keeps coming up, it's not going to go away, right? Those are the things that like, that's part of you. You're thinking about that a lot. So if you carved a little bit of space, even if it's just 30 minutes. So like, for me right now, my thing is music. Like I really like writing lyrics. I really like finding the right wall of sound to put it with. And I know it's silly, but it feeds me. And so I'm trying to just touch that at 30 minutes a day. And sometimes I can't. Sometimes there's just too many things to do and it's irresponsible, but I am trying to build that in. And maybe that's something that you want to build in, is just having that time, because there's no part of you that's hungering for it later. Like you fed that part of yourself and now you're more present for this other stuff, or a million things. Like, what do you want? If we were a month from now, we're like, dude, this has been amazing.
I would love to have in addition to, making author velocity and write, publish, repeat work. I mean, those are a given because, that's why we're here. But in addition to that, what I feel would satisfy me would be having the comic, it's out, and I could update it, twice a week or something. Find a way to like really make that happen. I feel I would be content more so, and I'd feel like not missing out on that element, because I was a cartoonist for a good 10 years where I wasn't writing.
Yeah.
That was a big part of me, and I stopped that when I started writing, and I would like a nice, healthy mix of the two together.
Okay, well, let's brainstorm on that, because we are looking for consistency, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can do something that is consistently feeding you, you might be less restless. Like part of the thing that I've noticed that keeps you from really producing is restlessness. And I have to believe that that's true for a lot of people listening, that if they're restless in parts of their lives, it's very difficult to find not just their creative space, but their consistent creative space, where showing up to be creative is just a matter of like being present. And so if you're thinking about this itch that you can't scratch, it might be easy. Like it might be unreasonable to think I'm going to do that for 2 hours a day with all the other things you're trying to do. But it might be very easy to say, I do this for 30 minutes a day at this time. This is when I do it. That's my writing time. Because if you can do that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you've ever had that, where I do this activity at this time in this space.
No, I've never had that, because I'm always subject to other people's schedules. Whether it's yours or somebody in the company or my family, there's always somebody that needs something from me, and it's overwhelming. And I'm sure, like, I don't even have it that difficult in this area. Like there are single mothers out there, or single fathers even, that they have to work a job and then do all the shit with the kids and then find a way in the middle of the night to like maybe carve out an hour to write. So I know I have it lucky compared to those people, but at the same time, my schedule isn't fully my own because it is subject to other people's. So and it's hard for me to get into that routine when it's always subject to other people. It's like an unknown. I don't like unknowns. I don't like variables.
Your family goes to bed before you, right? Consistently?
Not now. Now everybody's up later than me sometimes.
Well, okay.
Because now I got to be up in the morning and drive people. And
Let me rephrase that. What if you made drawing your bubble bath? So for me, it is like, that is a decompression time, like a very, very hot bath. And I
just shut the door and tell people leave the fuck alone.
It's the think tank. Yeah. What if that's what you did before bedtime? Because it's consistent. It's relaxing. It's you're softening your mind and channeling your creativity right from your brain to the page. And then you're going to bed, and you're going to go to bed satisfied. And then if it's the end of the day, then it's also your treat. It's like, I had a great day, and this is how I'm saying goodbye to the day. And that seems like a pretty great way to say goodbye to the day and build that habit.
Yeah, I like that. I think currently, like, I feel like I'm always, trying to finish something up before I go to bed, and I just feel stressed and anxious, and I wake up stressed and anxious. So
exactly. So if you do that and go to bed, and then, like, if that becomes a priority, maybe it will encourage you to do things like make better schedules, ask for help when you need it, prioritize. Like, okay, so let's go back a month in time when you were doing all these videos and you went to the very, very hardest one. If I had suggested then, hey, why don't you do the easier ones, and then we'll figure out the hard one last together. But doing that, now you got to write or you got to draw every day. Would you have been more likely to leave that hard one for later because you had a substitution?
Maybe, although I think doing the hard one taught me some things I needed to know to do the easier one. So I feel like that was a necessary step. So again, like if I had just had, maybe seen somebody do it, and I did look up many, many tutorials, and it just wasn't the right one for exactly what we were trying to do. So there was a lot of like,
that's the hard thing about that's the hard thing about building shit with someone like me, is that I'm always wanting to do the things that haven't been done yet. And so it's really
I'm
hard
looking
to find
for
tutorials.
a guide, a Sherpa, and you're like, no, we want to go to this other planet that nobody knows how to get to yet.
I know, I know, but at least it's always a good time. So so 1 month from now, we want to have
launch my comic.
Well, I think that we start small. I think that's also something that has stood in your way before, is that it's like on New Year's, I'm going to go to the gym every single day. And well, no, you're not. But if you say I'm going to go to the gym once a week in January, you can absolutely nail that, right? So I think we want to launch your comic at some point. I think for the next month, we want to establish the habit. So, you're drawing before bed every night.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And look, I'm already adding pressure to myself by giving myself a deadline. I do think it's better to do it your way, take it slow, and see how much I can actually do in that half hour or an hour a day. And then I can more accurately gauge how much time I'll need to do the thing that I want to do. So
yes. So you can't improve what you don't measure, right? Or you can, but not nearly as well. So I think that we should encourage your drawing before bedtime and then see how it affects your other work. So you're already doing a much better job about daily checking in, and so we can kind of see, what bandwidth looks like, but see, like, how does that affect your mood? How does it affect, are you going faster on your must-dos because your may-dos have been done, right? And I personally, I think that because productivity really is about focus, and focus is not super easy for you, but it's also very achievable for you. Like you are capable of it. I've absolutely seen that. And so I think that by trying to outsmart yourself, or not even outsmart yourself, but it's like what I'm always doing. It's, hey, I know where my weaknesses are, so I just want to build these very loose fences, and maybe we can do that. So over the next couple of episodes, we'll just check in with this and see how's your drawing going and all that. Does it sound good?
Yeah, it sounds good. Well, that sounds like an episode.
That does sound like an episode.
I hope people got value out of this. I feel like we didn't talk about, the concrete bit of writing, but I don't know. I think working through somebody else kind of gives you ideas. I don't know.
Yeah, I think most of the people listening to this, they know how to write. It's how do you get out of your own way? And it's very difficult as a creative to not get in your own way. Like, I get in my own way all the time, but less and less and less and less. Like,
It'd
every
help if you
year.
had a smaller nose.
Yeah, well, I do keep big nose down. That's how I get the work done. But yeah, so we'll talk about writing a little more specifically next week. But I think that getting productivity boulders out of the way is huge, and knowing what to focus on is super important. So,
All right. And I know I think we were supposed to figure this out beforehand, but what's our CTA?
well, you could always go to /repeaters.
And if there's anything else, we'll throw it in the description.
And we will get better at this, right, Dave?
Yeah, we will get way better at this.
Because who's in charge of the CTAs in the show?
I am.
All right, there we go. All right. I love you, listeners. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Shadows of the Sunshine State, redacted is his home. Lives a man named David Wright, who pens the great unknown. Diet Coke runs through his veins, a decoy wallet keeps him rich. Paranoia fuels his pen and creativity's his niche. Write, publish, repeat.